is what one kind of Nalbinding looks like. It's a really textury fabric, and I love textiles, so you'll probably be able to see that. So I'm gonna show you guys what Nalbinding is. We're gonna talk about who may have done Nalbinding, and this is really for world builders and authors, so that you can describe textiles in appropriate time periods, appropriate technology levels, and describe them, you know, what you might hear or feel or see, in some cases taste. And so I want to be able to share that information so that people can get it right. So, and yes, we are going to plan to raid Scribe of Nikoti today. A little bit of stream news real quick. I've been thinking about what we can do for emotes for when I get to affiliate. I have a couple drawings drawn out, so I will be doing my own emotes for that. I'm looking forward to that. And as you can see, I have a second camera today, so if things wobble a little bit, I'm sorry. We just got it to work. I'm gonna pretty much be focusing on tutorials for my stuff, and then I'll do some world building too. So today we're doing Nalbinding. Tuesday I'm gonna show you guys what it means to be inside of user CSS for your CSS stuff so that it's clearer. So yeah, and then the next craft stream, I think it'll be next Thursday if I'm ready for that. It'll be on knitting, actual knitting. So catching up with the chat here. Got in an early follow for, yeah. Oh, thank you for suggesting people subscribe. You guys are to follow. You guys are just wonderful, so sweet. Can I spell the craft? You know, it's just safer if I just copy and paste it for you guys today, because when I'm on screen, yeah, I don't type so well. So this is, and it's varies per country that you're looking at. Every country that I've seen seems to spell it different. Oh, thank you for following, Zog. So I've seen it spelled like Nulikinus. I've seen it spelled Nalbinding, which is, as American, that's how my mouth works. I've heard that to say it, it's more like knoll binding, like there's a knoll, a grassy knoll. So just so you guys know. Knoll is actually the Nordic word for a needle, and in this case this one's not very stabby. It's mainly for making our stitches. So I'm going to get back to my notes so I don't get lost here. After we do the demo, if we have time, we'll talk about the Anvilite Streamers Corps for anybody who's core. I always want to say corpse when I see it. The Anvilite Streamers Corps, the news that we've got for that. Okay, that's the show news. Let's talk about Nalbinding. I have done textile arts for years, and this one is actually one of my very favorites. So if I use a term that you guys aren't very familiar with, please let me know in the chat, and I will try to help you understand what I'm talking about, because for somebody, if you talk to somebody who's done something that isn't your field and they're talking all these weird words, kind of get lost, and I don't want you guys to get lost, just in case this isn't something you're as familiar with. So what is Nalbinding? Let's hop back over to Chrome here. Catching up with the comments here, Zog said he feels he doesn't follow as many. Well, thank you for following me, Zog. I really appreciate it. Dillian says apparently, oh, and I can't pronounce that. Someday I'm going to have you pronounce it for me, but it's a wonderful looking word, and I'm not gonna try to pronounce it, but it looks lovely. Yeah, I really should do a Twitter post. I didn't think about it. I had about 5 minutes and I was trying to run around and get everything done before this. Yes, null binding. So, that's where we're at. Let's talk about what it is. It's a craft done with lengths of yarn. You don't use it. You don't use from the same ball all the time like you do with knitting or crochet. Okay, so you have to tear pieces apart. It's done with loops and making knots, and it doesn't unravel, which makes it wonderfully durable. So if you get a hole in your piece, your mitten or your hat or something, it's not going to come undone. Oh, I tell you, I'm so sorry it's too late for you to watch, but hopefully you can catch it on the stream, not the stream, but the replay later. So thank you for coming. Hi, RPG Dinosaur Bob. I see you. You're hiding, but you just waved, so I see that. So, null binding often is made to be thick and warm, and it's extremely easy to do in the round. And I'm gonna hop back over to just the webcam, make sure you guys can see me, and show you guys some of the things that I've done, just so you can kind of get an idea of what it is. This is a hat I've done, and it's really, really thick. This is my Dead of Winter hat. Hi, Damn Stretch. Good to see ya. I made a hat just like this for my friend who went to a dog sledding class in North Dakota in the middle of February, and she said it passed the test for keeping her warm. So it's a really heavy, thick fabric. So we're here to make Christmas presents. Well, if I can teach it all in 1 hour with a lecture and talking about how things work for writers, that would be a miracle. I usually only teach about 5 people at a time in a live class because it's just that different of a craft that people have a harder time catching up on it. But you can do some really wild stuff with it. You can do some like knot work with it, and I've written up instructions on how to do that. And I'll give you a link to where to find this stuff. It makes a wonderful textured piece, but it didn't felt the way I thought it would. This was the same size, and it shrunk this way rather than up and down. And usually knitting will go the other way when it is run through the washer and you're felting it down. Yes, I will show this in action. And thank you for the compliment, Danny Adventures. That is my very favorite hat. I've had it for like 5 years, and I love it. I take very good care of it because I don't want to lose it. Yes, this would be awesome for dice bags, although you might want to felt it so that depending on how loose your stitches go, because any small dice might go through. Okay, but felting works. One of the most popular things to use null binding for is mittens. These are felted down. They're a little bit longer because, again, I expected it to felt down lengthwise, and it really didn't. But these are impervious to wind and rain for a long time, and snow. So a lot of null binding is felted down, but just know that these started out twice the width of my hand when they felted down. So you have to kind of plan for that when you make your stuff. I've made some bigger pieces, and I'll put this one on so you can kind of see, but I'll give you, I started out with this one in the very center and just made circles to make it very, very big. And left gaps for arms, and I made a vest. So it's kind of getting caught on my chair here, but and I'm blending into the background. But you can make some really small things and some really big things. The biggest thing I made, where did I put it? Was a sweater with a whole bunch of yarn that I had because I wanted to use it up. So, and this was I had to figure it out as I went because there aren't a lot of patterns for nail binding. Usually you just kind of try it on, and if it doesn't work, rip it out. Thank you so much for the follow, Scribe of Nikoti, you're so sweet. So, but it's really, really long. It started out about mid-thigh, and because nail binding stretches lengthwise, it's a dress now. So, anyway, it is really warm. This year I didn't even get to wear it. I have to wear it on a really, really cold day. So, that's kind of some samples there. Let's talk about some history. I've got to make sure here. Wish I could see everything at once. It's hard to see what you guys can see, and my notes, and the comments. So, thank you. I'm glad you like the yarn. I didn't make the yarn, but it is Malabrigo, the Malabrigo 4-ply yarn. If you look up Malabrigo 4-ply yarn, you'll find it. And they do gorgeous, gorgeous yarn. You know, I didn't know if I'd have the patience for bigger clothing, but the size of nail binding that I do, because everything is measured on my thumb, it goes much faster than I thought it would, and I actually didn't mind finishing it. So, would all that count as winter adventuring gear? It could. If you look at some of the historic-based Viking movies, one of my friends online, her name is Maria Lind Heel. She made the mittens for one of the movies, and I can't remember what movie it was. I'm sorry. I want to say it was like Arn the Templar, but I don't remember for sure. But anyway, so they researched and actually did historic pieces for this. So anyway, let's talk historic stuff a little bit before we can't do that anymore. Oh, there we go. I have a button for it. So one of the most popular items to make with nail binding is mittens, and this was forgive me, I don't speak Swedish. I think it's pronounced like the Osel mitten, and I cannot pronounce the wonderful name there in Sweden. This has, I've seen various dates on it. The latest one I found was 16th century, but I've seen various dates on it, so I don't know how accurate the dating system was they did on it. But this was found in a field, in some guy's field. So, but it is nail binding, and a lot of the stitches are named after the location that they're found at. So the stitch that this mitten is made in, we call the Osel stitch. So an older piece, because nail binding was done all over the world, pretty much every continent, obviously except for Antarctica, but variations on it are everywhere. So I love these Coptic socks because they were split-toed for their sandals. They could wear socks with their sandals. So anybody who tells you it's not fashionable to wear socks with your sandals, check out the Coptic Egyptians, and you can tell them that you are just late in your fashion. So, but these are one of the most recreated items in like historic groups because the stitch is easy and the projects go fast and they're just kind of fun and funky to wear. So this, like I said, this has been done all over the world, but it's most well known in a lot of the Nordic countries. So if you think Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Finland, even some Russia, and you'll find people doing it all throughout Europe, but it's not as common of a craft, and that's part of why I do it. I want to help keep the craft alive and help people, at least here in America or wherever I'm at. I'll be happy to teach it anywhere. So yeah, just so I'm going to break a few misconceptions, and I'll talk about it a little bit, and then I'll show you guys some more examples. It can be done with very small stitches. A lot of people think it can only be done in very big stitches, but there's some tricks you can do to make some very small stitches and use some very thin yarns. You can use non-wool yarns. Traditionally, this was usually done in a wool yarn because it can felt, and that's where they join the pieces of yarn together to make one continuous strand in the long run. And whenever you take a class, usually a beginning class, you're going to be taught how to do what's called the spit splice, where you splice the two pieces together by sticking the yarn in your mouth and felting them down together, which I think is really disgusting. But so I always bring spray bottles to my classes because I really don't want to touch people's spitty yarn if I'm helping them with their projects. But anyway, you don't have to spit on your yarn. Beautiful term. Yes, spit splice. It really is the term for it. But there's a lot of different ways you can make your joins, so it allows you to use different kinds of yarns. So I'll give you guys a couple examples here. I gotta make sure I can see what I'm showing you guys. Oh, here we go. Okay, so I had originally made a tiny mitten pattern for this. So this is just itty bitty stitches, if you can see those. And I do have that pattern on my site if you guys ever want to try this and want to make little tiny mittens. And here's a piece I did out of cotton. I was obviously learning this particular stitch because the edge is really crappy, but it was a cotton yarn. So people will tell you you can't do it, but you just have to do a different kind of join. So catching up in the comments here, Secondhand says, do you use historical wool materials, or is it more local, homemade, or specialty fabrics that you tend to sub in? I guess the focus is not the craft, but the material that I thought I'd check. It depends. So I wanted to learn Nalbinding when I was doing historical reenactment because I chose the Viking Age when I was in SCA. I didn't know anybody who would teach me it, so I didn't learn Nalbinding until after I got out of there. So my focus has not so much been the historical side, but what I can try to do with it and how I can push the craft to make it useful for everything. One of the groups I joined right away because Maria started a group that says, hey, let's try to do a sweater, because there weren't very many sweaters done in this, and it's blossomed online, and there's people doing sweaters all the time. There's a gal in Japan who I swear does one just about every week. I don't know how she does it so fast. So yeah, mittens for kittens. Yeah, just about. Or my ferrets. This would actually fit my ferrets a little bit better than my cat. So yeah, it would be good for Cabbage Patch dolls. You might have to have a little bit wider or a little bit bigger stitches, but yeah. So yeah. Okay. So those are some samples. You guys got to see a little bit of what it looks like and what you can do with it. I go back to my notes here. Showed you historic examples. Let's talk stitch variants. This is going to be tricky with. Oh. So I'm going to just kind of talk through this one and then pop up my. Which camera? I guess I don't have a button for that on my thing. Because I have the handy dandy Stream Deck. If you guys ever have a little bit of cash, I bought this a long time ago to use for audio editing. This has been a lifesaver for my streams, by the way, just so you know. So if you want to punch in different commands to go to different scenes, it really helps. So you put loops on. This can be done different ways, but usually people do stitches on their thumb as their guide for the sizing. So it varies for how many stitches you have on your thumb. You could have lots of stitches on your thumb. You could pick up stitches behind your thumb and have, or not stitches, but loops, different numbers of loops. You can go in different directions. Every little variation ends up in a different stitch. Hi, Heel 18, it's good to see ya. We're talking about Nalbinding today. So if you don't know what that is, it's kind of like knitting, but much, much older. In fact, one thing I didn't bring up a little bit ago is some kinds of knitting in that Coptic stitch, or in the Coptic sock I showed you, kind of look like a twisted knitting, and so that it looks like the little loop was just twisted. So people sometimes think that knitting came from Nalbinding, and there's different sources that say otherwise, but it varies. So anyway, every little change you do to a potential stitch makes a new stitch, and there's zillions of different kinds of stitches that you can try. I haven't had a chance to try them all. So, next one. Oh, let's talk needles, because if you guys end up using something like this in your world, depending on when, you know, what technology level your world has, it could vary what materials you're going to have available. So we'll bring in my handy dandy gob of needles, and this is just kind of part of my collection. Some of them, most of them my husband and I made, but some of them I bought in various places. The one I'm using today, my husband made for me. I had to have a whole bunch of them made really quick, and I didn't have time to make them, so he made them for me out of walnut. They can be made of wood. Most of them I have here are, yeah, that one's actually laminated wood. Not laminated, no, it is a laminated wood. These are all wood. These two, this one is actually deer or elk antler, I can't remember which. This one is a horn bone, but the hole on it is so fine you can only use it for really fine yarns, and I like to do much thicker yarns because my projects go faster and I find it to be a little warmer, and I don't have to use as many loops to make a thick material. Songbird, you said is there a benefit to using different needle materials? There can be. A lot of it is going to be whether you want to display reenactment or not. For reenactment or not, you want to probably use something more historical. So think Viking Age and older, they would have had wood, bone, or antler, or horn, and metal occasionally. So it just depends on what your people would have access to. But today, I mean, just for fun, my husband and I tried to, kind of hard, it's odd for me to do this. My husband and I just for fun had an old circuit board that we decided to see if we could do it. One thought on benefits though, some materials will get catches in them. Wood is going to be primarily going to get catches in it more. So if you use wood, just be prepared that you're going to have to sand it down after a while, because as it goes past your thumb, it's going to get roughed up. Past your thumb and past the yarn, it's going to get roughed up a little bit. So I always put a note in with my needles that I send with my students that you're going to have to sand it eventually a little bit, just kind of the care and feeding of your needles. Acrylic ones, though, I've never had to sand down again. So it just depends. And then I had a couple 3D printed just to see if it was possible. This was one of the first ones, and it's not real smooth. I don't really like using it. This one was one of the latest materials at the time from Shapeways. That's what it was. My husband helped me design it in CAD, and we had it printed up just for fun to see if it was possible to do, and it worked. Okay, catch up on the comments here. Heel says, I feel like I've seen my grandma do something like that. You may have. Similar looking things could, it could be Nalbinding. It could be a similar looking thing could be tatting, where they have a little shuttle with yarn in it and they make a lace, which I am not proficient in again. So, just so you know. Songbird, well, does the circuit board work? Yes, we had to sand and sand and sand and sand. This has been sanded down so much, and I am really picky. If it catches at all, I don't want it, because it will make extra fuzzies on my yarn and make it look not as nice. So we sanded and sanded and sanded, and my poor husband was really sick of sanding it for me. But this was one of them that I think caused him to teach me how to make my own. So I get to go play with power tools now. Heel says, I don't remember what it's called in Swedish, but I remember saying it wasn't crocheting. Was it with a needle like this? One of the Nordic made needles, I got in Decorah, Iowa when I went there for the first and I think only Nalbinding gathering in the United States. This was one of them by them. So I'm guessing it might have looked like this, or it might have looked closer to this bone one. You can tell me if you know more of what it looked like. I'd be horribly curious, because it's always nice to know about more people who do this craft. Lagna says, I need to get my 3D printer going again. Yes, but you want to make sure it's, we used to have a filament lay 3D printer, and it wouldn't work for it very well, because you have to have a very, very smooth surface, and if you sand it, it's going to ruin that. So if you happen to have one of the light ones, I can't think of what the UV ones, that will probably work better if you want to make your own. But you gotta, my husband's doing a strength test on, totally an aside, my husband's doing a strength test on different plastics, and you gotta find something that's not gonna bend in half really easily, because he used to make needles for me, and I'd test them and I'd break them and he'd get really mad. But I'm like, if it's not gonna hold up to that, it's not gonna hold up for my work. So you've seen similar ones to the first one, says Heel. Okay, okay. Which would have been the walnut one, yeah. Okay. So anyway, that's kind of a sample. I keep my group of my samples together so that people can kind of see what they might look like. We don't have time to go into why the holes are different places. There can be reasons for that. Ask me offline if you want to know. Thank you, Danny. It's neat that you think of them. Okay, so it's time to show you guys what this looks like while it's being done. In fact, I'll get a brand new, this is a reminder, I'm supposed to go play with my ferrets, but my husband's doing that for me right now while we're streaming, so he gets to play with the ferrets and I don't. I wish I could bring them up here, but they can be really noisy, so. Okay, so I've broken off a good length, and I fold it over so that it's easier to put in my needle. It's kind of hard to show on the camera, but I've basically made it into about thirds. And I put one of the ends through my needle. So, and then we're going to have to create loops around our thumb. So I'm going to want a couple different loops, so I just kind of wrap it around my thumb. And then to secure it, I just put it, let's kind of do that again. I'll hold it down better. I put it between the yarn and my thumb, put the needle through. And that's where I'm always going to put my needle. So, and then however many I want on the thumb, I leave on my thumb. And for this, I'm just going to put one on my thumb and one on the back. So I can show you a pretty simple stitch, and then I'll show you some variations. So every time we do a knot binding stitch, we're actually making a knot. So if you ever want to take out knot binding, it is the blessing and the curse of knot binding, because you have to undo every knot. You can't just rip it or frog it, like, because it sounds like ribbit when we rip it out. It's not easy to take out. So, oh, thank you, Erin Azarin. There we go. Thank you for the follow. I would love to do a ferret stream. It might have to be outside, because indoors they either have to be in a closed space. In my house, because ours are not very well potty trained, so we'd probably have to do it outside if we ever do a ferret stream. But it would be really fun. Okay, so on to doing this. We have the loops on our thumb, and in this case I have one on my thumb and one behind my thumb that I'm going to pick up, okay? So I go into the one behind my thumb, as if I'm almost stabbing my thumb. And then I'm going to twist the needle and go between the yarn and my thumb. And I'm going to pull all the yarn through, so I have a new loop down here, and I'm going to push the old loop behind, and that makes a stitch. So I'm going to do a couple of these for you guys. And I found a quick trick. Instead of having to throw the loop later, I pull my thumb out of the loop, so I'm ready to go for the next one. Just makes my stitches a little bit faster. Come here. It's always a little trickier starting out because it's not as, you don't have anything solid to work on and to hold on to. Thank you for following World Anvil. You are so sweet. Thank you. Okay, give you guys a real quick. This is what the stitches look like. When you turn it over, there's these funny little bumps on the back. That is normal. People always like, oh, I did it wrong. No, it just hasn't straightened out yet. So that's what a chain of first stitches looks like. I'm going to pull out my other project so you guys can kind of see what it looks like to connect to an actual project. Another row. Oh, where's the top? Okay. So this is a project I was working on. I'm going to make a cocoon wrap. It'll be a big wrap. Oh, thank you, Exasperated DM, for the follow. You guys are so sweet. Okay, so we do the same thing that we were doing before for this stitch, except we pick at least one loop up from the previous row in order to go, and then we go into our loop behind my thumb, twist, go underneath between the yarn and my thumb, and pull through. And you just keep doing that over and over. And it's pretty simple to do once you learn how to do it and get the motions down. And I will give you guys some links at the end of the chat, because the chat is at the end of the stream, because this is going faster than I anticipated. But just so you guys can kind of see what it's like to do this, and maybe you can hear the yarn a little bit. I'll put it up closer to the mic so you can hear it. It's a very soothing sound, I think. So, okay, catch up in chat. Heel says, I've always liked working with yarn and thread. My dad's side of the family has a long-standing tradition of collecting too much fabric, threads, and yarn. Yes, I'm so with you. I have a wall of yarn. My friend who had a big wall of yarn, she called it insulation and preparation for the apocalypse. So, well, thank you. I'm glad you think it's pretty, Sable. Thank you. Wow, 2 more to go. Wow. Okay. Oh, it's good to see you back, eSongbird. Thank you for lurking. It's lovely to have you here. So that's kind of a real quick demo. Is there anything else I needed to talk about? Oh, ergonomics. Let's talk ergonomics really quick, just so you guys know what can go wrong if somebody pushes themselves. So if you're doing a stitch with a ton of loops, you're going to put more torque on your thumb, and it's going to twist it. The Ossel mitten that I showed you guys a while back. Now let's go back to that. Close it back to the Ossel mitten here. This mitten, I did a sample in this, and it hurt my thumb. I could not Nalbind for a week. Thank you, Lorraine, for hosting the stream. You guys are so sweet. But anyway, the more torque you put on your thumb, the more rest you're going to need to do, because otherwise you're going to have a very sore thumb joint. Oops, and I guess you guys got to see where I'm working here. Oop, wrong one. I have to go back to Streamlabs for that. There we go. Okay, so it will put torque here, and it will hurt here if you do a lot of loops, if you work with very tight loops on your hand. and certain stitches where you have to kind of look and you're pushing, putting torque on your thumb, it's going to hurt. Okay, so be careful if you ever try this. Take care of your hands. They have to last the rest of your life. I don't think we're going to have time. We'll come back to increases and decreases and all of that. I will really quick show you what it takes to do, to undo a stitch, and I have a story to share there. To undo a stitch, I usually put the loops on my thumb so I can easily tell where I need to pull. You pull at the bottom, you tighten at the top, and you pull at the bottom to undo. And you have to pull the thread through for every single stinking stitch. So it's kind of a bugger to undo non-binding. So the story that goes with this is I was working on, do I have it here? Yes, I do have it. This purple poncho, and I was trying to finish it off for an online group. We had a race, and to finish a project, you got points for it. And I was working on this as we were driving across South Dakota, and it was 106 that day. This is wool. It was on my lap. I was very warm. And I had to undo. At one point, I just decided to cut because I had to get it done, and I had the braided edge to do here, and I knew I had to get it done, so I just cut, and I was hot and I was cranky. So don't null bind with wool, heavy things on your lap while driving in 106-degree weather, and take care of your hands, and if you have to, just cut the thread. Sometimes it will save your sanity, and your sanity is very, very important. So, okay, next bit. All right, so let's talk about writing using your senses. And I'll give you guys, get to look at me again, and my hair looks green because it's reflecting. Sorry. Writing using the senses. So think about how your needles might be made. In historic times, they would have been carved and sanded, and probably carved, by hand with a knife, or maybe they would have put it on a lathe, because some needles are round. I don't have any examples of that, but I have seen a few of them. Or if you're using modern tools, when my husband taught me how to make these, because I helped him design what I liked, and then I made him teach me how to do it so that I could make them and sell them. I don't sell them much anymore, so, but because there's a few more places that sell them online now. But I got to learn how to use a bandsaw, a belt sander, a drill press, sandpaper, and also a Dremel. So I got to use all sorts of fun tools that the stereotypical woman doesn't usually get to use, and it was a whole lot of fun. And my husband was a little bit worried about me using the bandsaw while he was gone, but I did okay. I have all my fingers. So if you think about the yarn, let's hop back over to Chrome, and I can show you guys how this would have been done. In the most old times, they would have used drop spindles, and so again, the twist is what makes the yarn. And so, and it holds the wool or whatever you have together. So they would have used drop spindles, and you can make them out of CDs. People in South America. Songbird, thank you for hosting the stream. You're so sweet. And they would have, in South America, they'll use like rocks or potatoes or just anything where they can get a good spin going. That way. Heel says, I think it's called null binding, and we use it for mittens. Yes, that's exactly it. Oh, speaking of, if you haven't seen it, Heel, you may want to look at, let me grab a webcam here, this book, okay? It's called Winters-Voss. It's kind of hard. It's backwards for me, but it's Winters-Voss, and it has some gorgeous mittens, and They also talk about, and I don't read Swedish, so I'm sorry, I can't tell you a whole lot about it, but they tell the story of the people that made these, and they tell about the different embroidery patterns and the different edgings, which are unique to each area, which I thought was really, really cool. So yes, it is. I can verify that. I don't know if it's that exact spelling, but yes, it is. It has the funny little A at the top. I don't know what that's called, that little circle on the A, and I don't know what that's called, but yes, if you want to get a gorgeous book, Winters-Voss. While we're distracted, I will show you guys a couple beginner books. Maria Lind Heel sells books on, some of these are odd. Thank you for the follow, Time Pool. Maria sells these books. I think she sells them online now, otherwise you can message her on Facebook. She gives instructions on how to make them, because I don't have as many patterns, and there aren't a lot of patterns, but Maria did this, so. Well, thank you for supporting anyway. Thank you for the follow, Time Pool. I really appreciate it. Yes, heel. Yes, it does translate to winter flowers if I understand it right. Thank you for the verification on that. So, there is a book called, it was originally published in German. It's called Nalbinding, Was ist denn das? But she put out an English version of it called Nalbinding, What in the World is That? Yes, thank you. You guys helped me get to 50. You guys are amazing. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm totally distracted now. Okay, we were talking about Ulrike is an amazing nailbinder. She does a lot of the historic aspects and gives like a zillion different references as to where nailbinding has been done and finds have been found. And evidently German is longer in descriptions than in English, so she had to have my one brag page. She needed some extra examples, so I have some examples that I did in here. So you guys got to see this vest here. This is a scarf I designed, and then I also did a toy Nessie monster because, well, everybody needs a needle-bound Nessie monster. So, so if you get the English version, mine is in here. If you order it through Germany, you get the color, and I don't get any profits from this. It's all Ulrike's. But if you order it through America, you get the black and white. That's just how the printers worked. And we have just a couple more minutes. But thank you, you guys. You guys are amazing. Thank you for helping me reach affiliate. You guys are amazing. Thank you. Okay, breathe. Okay, so we talked about spindles, and it can also be done with spinning wheels. I think most people know what a spinning wheel looks like, but just in case you don't, this is an example. Not the game wheels, but the traditional spinning wheels. And the one in the Cinderella, was it Cinderella movie, where she's not Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, where they're afraid she'll prick it. It's totally wrong. Totally wrong. It is not. You couldn't spin anything on that one. So just so you know. But anyway, so that's kind of what some of the tools look like. And someday I will do a spinning demo for you guys, but that's going to require more thinking about how to do it. Let's talk about for writers, because that's part of what I was originally wanting to, so you guys could describe things going on. So, yes, thank you so much. You guys are amazing. Thank you. I wouldn't have affiliate without you guys, so thank you. I am having a hard time thinking because I'm that excited. So thank you guys. You guys are amazing. So, Secondhand Samurai says, thanks for the info check and the follow. Yes, thank you so much, Heel. Danny Adventure says, yay, amigurumi, but done with no many. Yeah, it's you can do tiny little, cute little figures like amigurumi. So, Secondhand Samurai says, my friend spins her own alpaca wool, but I gather that it is pretty common because it is a good wool. It's becoming more common here in North America, but in South America, it's very common to have. No, llama is more common. Alpaca is a softer, more silky kind of feel. I've got to spin it, and it is really fun, but it's very slippery to spin, and it's a wonderful fabric. So it's kind of like the silk of the animal hairs. Okay, so let's talk about the senses as far as Nalbinding goes, and I'll go through these really quick. You might have, maybe so you guys can see me, so it's not just the spinning wheel picture. You might have the brush of the yarn on your hand or thumb, and so it might feel soft or it might feel rough depending on the yarn, or if you got it from a lamb or an older, a lamb is going to be softer than an older sheep. How long you've been doing the craft? So is it hurt? Have you hurt your hands? You know, have you been rough on your hands, or have you been drawing your arm up to try to hurry with your stitches, and that's going to make your arms tired? Do the stitches put torque on your thumb? I kind of talked about that. So take a pause and catch up in the comments here. Heel says, yarn made from milk is the coolest yarn in my opinion. I've only got to play with that a little bit, but it is an amazing stuff. There are knitting needles made out of casein, which comes from milk too. So it's really a wild substance. Secondhand Samurai says his friend who did that she made a hobbit scarf from it. 8 foot long, has the story of the Hobbit in picture. Wow! It won a Women's Institute prize. I am not surprised. That is amazing. Sabola Radio says alpaca is lovely. Yes, it's warm and it's less irritating for some people, but it drapes more, which means it's going to stretch more. So there's strengths and weaknesses to it. So but I do love alpaca. Back to the senses as far as feel goes, you're going to have the texture of the cloth. So there's definitely a feel to this. There's kind of ribs where the loops are. The cloth is often thick and warm. Generally, not always, but generally, the farther north and closer to Russia you go, the more loops and involved techniques there are in your stitches. The smell. Depending on the time period and purpose, you may have lanolin still in your yarn. It's called spinning in the grease. If you think about lanolin, it's actually found in lotion, so it's not anything really weird. They just kind of clean it up. It's also great for like waterproofing a sweater. If you look at like the Iran sweaters, not Nalbinding, but there are purposes to it. The Iran sweaters that the fishermen would wear, they would still have the lanolin in there to help waterproof it. The type of the fiber can affect it. There's a spinning factory in Finland that will still process a wool and dog hair blend. Dog hair is wonderful. It can smell a little bit, but it's really, really, really warm. But they require 44 pounds at a time. That's a lot of dog hair. So yeah. Back to smell. The type of fiber can, or the dyes, sorry, they can smell, especially if you're doing dyes. People usually do this outside and don't natural dyes, because some of the ingredients really, really stink, particularly if you have to have urea in your dyes, because that kind of spreads out the dye and makes the fabric wetter for longer. They didn't know how to chemically separate this in historic times, and so they would use urine. So it definitely has a smell, and the needle may also have a smell. So think about what it's made of. If it was fresh carved, you're going to smell the scent of the wood or the bone. So I'll catch up in comments here. Heel says it's been known how to extract and convert milk casein since the 1930s. Wow, I didn't know that. That's really cool. Yeah, I definitely recommend that too. I might have to look more into it. Thank you for sharing, because I love learning about new textiles, so that's really cool. Secondhand says Wool Dogs was an interesting video on Native American crafts on YouTube. I had no idea about that type of things. Yeah, I was really surprised too, but there's some dogs were raised for that. You know, if you think about some of the dogs from the northern climates, they have really thick undercoats, and that the undercoat is what makes that really, really warm fiber. So, okay, the last few things that you can add for senses to stories. Nalbinders often use the spit splice. You might not just taste the yarn, but whatever it had in the dye. This is why I don't recommend doing it, because I think it's gross. I usually use a squirt bottle, but people would spit splice things together, and I didn't have time to show you that. Maybe another day. But there could be taste involved. Then sounds, of drawing the yarn through the loops past your thumb, or as the fibers are broken. Let's see if I can do it. I can't see it enough to separate it. Oh, no, there's a little whip sound that comes from the fibers being separate. You don't want to tear them apart, but you want to separate it out and untwist the yarn. I was using a single ply yarn, but you can use pretty much any number of plies. I just do this because it's thicker, and I usually projects for my beginning students go faster with the thicker yarn, and they feel a sense of accomplishment sooner. So those are the senses for possible nail-bound items if you want to write that into your books or your world building. One of my favorite books, and I haven't got to read the sequel to it, but is a book called, let's see if I can pop over here and show you guys, and then I'll put it into the chat too. Are we on Chrome? Okay, I think we are. Yeah, we are. So this book had Nalbinding in it. It's a historical fiction fantasy, because this lady time travels from future Iceland, future from now Iceland, to back to the Viking Age, and she talks about her experiences and her disorientation, and then she learns to do Nalbinding in the book, and I really enjoyed it. It is a bit of a romance, but there's also a fair amount of adventure, and I love her strong spirit as a woman, and how she grows in here. So, and then there's the sequel to it called So Wild a Dream, which I haven't got to finish yet. But I will someday, and I'll put that one in the chat if you guys end up wanting to read it. I really enjoyed her book. What happened is she shared what she had of the book before, because things were going crazy in her life, and she wanted people to read what she had, and now it was put out not too long ago, but we waited several years for the finished So Wild a Dream, and like I said, I haven't got to finish it. So, but I want to know what happens to the gal that is in this book. So, anyway, because it's a gal who goes back and meets the gal that ended up staying in Viking Age Iceland. So, I will catch up on comments here. Scribe of Nikoti says there should be a room in the Discord for book. Yes! I wonder if we could do that under resources, or at least non-fiction ones. Yeah, we should ask for that, because that would be awesome. I would love to have more of a variety of reading materials myself. So, what else do we have? I will give you guys that's what I have. Book club, yes, book club, awesome. that's what I have on Nalbinding for today. I don't have time to get into anything else. I could talk for hours and hours and hours on Nalbinding. Usually my classes are like a minimum of 3 hours. So you guys got the super condensed version of what Nalbinding is, but maybe it will give you at least a taste for what this is. So yeah, and if you want to learn more about it, I have a thing I link to for the resources I usually hand out to my students. Yeah, Nalbinding in a nutshell, yeah. So you guys can check these out. It gives links to some of the groups I'm in. Not because I'm there, but the especially some of the Facebook groups are amazing and helpful. And they've even offered to like help me translate some books, and I'm like, I don't want to take that much advantage of them. But they're wonderful people. So Heel says, when is the Viking Age to you? I think of the Viking Age ending about the year 1000, so it would have, I don't know enough about the history here to recall off the top of my head. It's been a while. I'm thinking it was like maybe the 600s or 700s to about the year 1000. So it was a long time period. The Vikings ruled the European seas for a long time. So the Viking Age opened with it. You guys are awesome. The Viking Age opened when IKEA opened in the United States, so scribe them decoded. That is just the thank you. That made